Welcome back, everybody. This is the National Hispanic Coalition for Aviation Excellence Career Series podcast. This is your host, Elsie Hernandez. Today, we're joined by Lucia Tran, a mechanical engineer with the Federal Aviation Administration, whose journey reflects perseverance, hard work, and dedication to engineering and public service. Lucia has supported infrastructure and facility projects across the central United States while helping maintain critical systems that support the safety and reliability of the National Airspace System. Thank you so much for joining us today. And can you introduce yourself and share a little bit about your journey into engineering and aviation?
Sure. Again, my name is Lucia Tran. Thank you for having me. I graduated with a bachelor's in mechanical engineering from the University of Texas at El Paso, picks up, and that is also where I got a minor in Spanish. So my journey into the aviation career that I have now started with a unmanned aerial vehicle class that I took in college, and it was kind of like they taught you about drones and the regulations that the FAA has on them. So that kind of showed me what the FAA was, or what they did in a smaller scale with the UAEs. And then from there, I moved on to get my drone pilot license. It was for small drones, but a pilot license nonetheless. So then after that was when we went to the career fair and I saw the FAA little table, and I was really excited to drop off my resume because I was like, I know you. I've heard about, the FAA, what they do. Little did I know what I was getting into. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm really happy and grateful for the FAA for their opportunities. But about 6 months after that career fair, I got an interview, and then that's when I started with the FAA. From there, I started as a resident engineer, and then I transitioned into communications installation. And then after that, I wanted to do more with my degree than installing. So I went ahead and did design. I applied for the design position, and that's when I got the position. And I've been there since.
Great. So you started as a resident engineer out in the field. So how did those experiences help shape you as the design engineer you are today?
Well, when you're a resident engineer, as new as I was, I didn't know anything. So it really shaped me for the entirety of the position that is design engineering. So when you start as a resident engineer, you are looking at the basic steps of what it is to be a designer. So you're overlooking the contractors, what they're working on. You learn to read drawings and specifications, and you learn what it means to put a package together, which is what the designer does. So it really just showed me what it meant to be a designer, what efforts go into making a complete package that is then turned into a project, and what it means, how it is that contractors look at drawings, how they interpret them, and what that means to the FAA is sometimes we'll have certain verbiage that a contractor will interpret one way, but we mean another way. So we also learn to communicate with the contractors in a way, and also we learn to communicate with the facility stakeholders. So we learn a lot of communication, how to get across efficiently and also respectfully. A lot of these are managers. Airport personnel are also like high rank Army and military personnel. So that can also be a little bit intimidating, but you learn all of that when you're an RE. So that's a little bit of what it taught me when I started.
Yeah, so it's being all together in the same world of installation and construction and projects, but also each stakeholder kind of speaks and communicates in a different way, which is pretty cool and interesting, but also, I guess, at times sort of confusing and a challenge. Okay, so you mentioned you have your drone pilot's license. Tell me a little bit about that. That seems interesting.
So the class was on drones, right? So we started with going out to the middle of the desert, and they had Border Patrol come in with their drones, and they were kind of showing us, this is what you can do if you have a pilot's license. And I was like, oh, I want to have one. And I went to an airport, actually. It was a small airport in Santa Teresa, New Mexico. And I took the exam and I passed it. And I was really excited for that. Unfortunately, that's as far as that went. I couldn't really use it because I didn't really have a drone. And you really need a drone for that.
And what kind of stuff did you learn? What kind of opportunities or applications did you learn about while you took that class?
So you learned a lot about the limitations of what you could do with a drone, certain heights that you can use a drone without having to report it to like an air traffic control tower after a certain height. And they kind of show you it's like an upside down cake of like the airspace. And then after that, you have to communicate to the air tower and tell them, hey, I'm in this location and I'm going to be at this height and I'm just going to be taking video, taking pictures. So at that point, you do that more so for the protection of other aircraft as well as the protection of your own drone. So you learned a lot of airport markings. So you would have to, pull out a map of your nearest airport and be like, okay, so this is the airspace that I'm under and this is the air traffic control tower that I have to communicate to. And there are these landmarks here. This is restricted area and, those kinds of things. So it was you really needed to learn that in order to be using a drone the right way. A lot of times you see now drones just flying everywhere. And you're like, I'm pretty sure those are not being watched by the air traffic control tower like they should be.
Yeah, I would have honestly never thought. I never considered that there were so many restrictions or regulations or rules to follow because I just think about recreational drones, for recording fun scenery or activities or something. Something pretty cool. I guess it's another opportunity that you learn about. The more you know. Is there anything that in particular that excites you about engineering and aviation?
What really excites me about engineering and aviation is the reality that we are actively protecting the national airspace. So it is really motivational to know that the small things that we are doing, at a control center, we're maybe replacing some HVAC or we are upgrading a control system. We can know that that small thing that we're doing, that small project, is somehow impacting that whole airspace, and the airspace will cover, multiple states. So we know that if we're doing our job correctly, we're protecting the people adequately. And that I find that really exciting and just makes me value my job a little bit more and also humbles me to know that we are responsible for taking care of the nest. Kind of like they tell you when you start at the FAA, like the nest safety comes first, and it sure does.
Yeah, that's a super sweet and honest and humble answer, and I completely agree with you. I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before, but I, at one point, was kind of scared of the aviation industry for the same reason that, we have such a large impact. And it is very humbling to know that we have some kind of contribution to the national airspace. And your story is especially inspiring too, because you are the daughter of people who came from Mexico to the United States. You were the first to attend university. So tell me how that was. Tell me about your accomplishment and what that meant to you and to your family.
So my mom and my father, they came here from Mexico, and my mom came here with nothing. Her family all stayed in Mexico, so she was here by herself for a really long time until she was able to get her legal papers and then, cross to see her family. And well, it's interesting because my instinct was always to do well in school. My mom never really had to push me because I was already doing well for myself. If I got good grades, she would celebrate, my effort, but she was never like, hey, like, you gotta get an A, you gotta get an A on this. Like I just kind of knew that I had to try my best at the opportunities that were in front of me. So my mom and my dad, they were always supportive of me. Like when I went to, like even just in high school, like they were always make sure that I had like meals when I was there, make sure that I was well fed, that I was able to get transportation to any of the activities. So like, the UIL, I always did like the educational type. I did the math competition, and then I also did other current events competitions. So they were always supportive of getting me there on time and making sure I was there for practices and all those things. When I went to college, I was still in that same state of mind where I wanted to do my best or as best as I could. And I believe that for my parents, like it meant a lot that I took advantage of the opportunities that were in front of me, and that I can't speak for them, but I believe that they see my accomplishments and see that their efforts and their struggle was worth it. So my dad, as someone who came from Mexico, he didn't really have an education. He got his GED, but because of not having like a higher education, he had to work low income jobs and then side hustles. And so he would always work really long hours. And my mom was always, she was a stay at home mom at one point, but she also made sure that she always had books and stuff. So that kind of inspired me to see my mom always be so studious. She would love like reading up on health books, and she would always be interested on how the body works. And I would always see her and I'm like, if she can study for long hours, and so can I. So yeah, I would like to think that they are proud of me and that they don't regret their sacrifice coming over to the US. Because mine was also really young, so it was more of a sacrifice to leave her family at that age for her.
Yeah. Wow. That's really inspiring and really beautiful that you had a family support system, and that there was a healthy balance, it sounds like, between support and discipline. And so, yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to, being first generation, similar stories. So can you tell us a little bit about any challenges that you faced or that you still may face as a first generation college student or being in the workforce, and any advice for students going through similar paths, maybe pursuing STEM fields in the industry?
As first generation student and also eldest daughter, I had a lot to figure out on my own. I had friends that were in college, but they were so far ahead of me that their experience was a little bit different than mine. For me personally, I had to figure out a lot of like FAFSA, applying for financial aid and help like that. I also struggled a lot just with like scheduling your courses. What works best for me? Like, no, there was no one to tell me that a 7 a.m. class was not a good idea. And there was no one to tell me that I need to maybe have a gap so that I wouldn't be
Yeah.
running from class to class when one of my classes was on the other side of campus. So like those are like the small struggles that I had. But there were also the larger struggles where I'm facing a really difficult class, calculus or differential algebra, and I don't know how to answer a question. And my family, my mom and my dad didn't really learn math at that high of a level, so she didn't, or they didn't know how to answer those questions. So
Mhm.
that was a lot of growing up on my own and learning how to figure out things out. Of course, learning. So I continued with just moving forward. There was no other option for me. Not graduating college was not an option. So did, I didn't graduate with a 4.0 GPA. I did also fail some classes, and some advice to have, sorry, some advice for the younger people that are possibly pursuing STEM would be to use all your resources. A lot of schools offer a lot of career and college, not courses, what is it? Resources, or they have a college and career center. When I was in high school, I would spend a lot of my time there. At first opportunities for scholarships, if I qualified for them, like I would apply for them. At the same time, you would want to take advantage of advanced placement courses and dual credit, because they'll save you a lot of time and they also save you a lot of money, especially if you grow up like me, which was extremely low income. Those courses save you so much money because, well, university is expensive. And then I would also say, like, don't give up. Like, just because you fail a test or even fail a course, like, that's not the end of your career. You can keep on trying again, and a lot of universities will replace your failing courses. So, like, it's not the end of your story if you fail a course. It doesn't mean you're a failure. You just gotta keep on going, keep on trying.
Exactly. I think, yeah, that's a really hard one. It's a hard pill to swallow when you're not doing well in your classes, and you can get a little sad and upset, maybe frustrated with yourself, but it's also really difficult to, on top of that, try to stay positive and try to continue and keep that focus and that mindset, and deciding that continuing in that slump, or staying in that failure mode is not an option. You can always just bounce back and keep moving forward. Why do you think that representation is important in STEM and aviation today? And what conversations do you think that the industry should continue having to help with diversity and inclusion?
Representation is so important because when you're young and you look at people that look like you, it's encouraging. It makes you want to say, hey, if that person did it, that I could do it. If that person was able to make it as a woman in STEM, then I can make it as a woman in STEM. And for me, it was really encouraging to see that despite the fact that engineering is a male dominant field, there are women out there that are doing so well in engineering. And when I was in school, I was really happy to see that the women supported each other. And so it was so nice to see that even though it was just a little bit of women, like, there were women and there were Hispanic women there. And I believe that we need to work hard not only to recruit diversity, right? Because you can hire X, Y, and Z, someone who turned in your resume. And if you're picking them just because they're diverse, like, that's not going to help, right? You need to pick them because they are diverse and capable of doing a good job, or diverse and willing to learn and willing to work. And so with that, you also have to have a good support system within your organization. So if your organization is trying to recruit diverse groups, then they also have to work hard at maintaining those groups. So trying to keeping them within the organization and keeping them and having them be successful. So retention and success. So the organizations have to be willing to have conversations about respect and mentorship. It's really important for me personally. Without mentorship, I wouldn't be the engineer that I am now. So if organizations are putting people in mentorship positions that are not willing to be mentors, then you're creating a gap to where the next person can't learn what the previous person knew. And it also affects the new person, because they're like, I want to learn, but there's no one willing to teach me. There's no one that wants to support my growth. So organizations really have to look within, do we have the right person in mentorship positions? And if we don't, are we willing to make the changes so that we help this new group grow? And a lot of these new groups are very diverse, because I've seen a lot of growth, at least like when I was in school, like, there would be more and more girls in the newer classes. So that was really, where was I trying to go with this?
Uplifting?
Yeah, it was uplifting to see the previous girls, like the older, because sometimes you have mixed classes, right? That the older college girlies, like the ones that are junior, they're senior, were willing to kind of guide on the younger generation. And if that's like a reality within a university system, then it should be a reality within, the FAA and other organizations, Lockheed Martin or whatever, aviation, pilot schools and all that. Is just mentorship is just really, really important.
Yeah, that's absolutely accurate. I would say I agree with that. So you were a field engineer, a resident engineer, and now you're a design engineer, and I believe you want to pursue your professional engineering license. So tell me a little bit about that. What do you hope to accomplish with that? Or are there any other goals that you want to pursue later on in the future with your career?
Well, with the FAA, we know that PE is not required, yet I always want to challenge myself. So getting a PE, actually, I would still have to take the FE exam. So that is just like a next challenge that I'm telling myself. So if I can take the FE, then I can dedicate the time and then take the PE. And I believe that it'll help me be a better engineer. There are certain things that are learned through mentors, but that they may also be maybe old codes and regulations that aren't necessarily up to date. So I believe that learning through studying for the PE will help me get a little bit more actualized, a little bit more up to date with codes and regulations. And it'll also just challenge me in a way that I haven't really been challenged since college. I mean, the job is pretty challenging, but I believe that the FE and the PE will be also math intense and things that I haven't seen in a while. So I believe that it's exciting to go back into the grind of studying and, taking tests and quizzes and making sure that I'm ready to actually take the FE and the PE. So it's just another step after, well, actually, I would want to have my next step with the FAA be to become a lead engineer. I believe that I have learned a lot and I just don't want it to end with me. I would love to pass on my knowledge to someone else eventually. And if it's another Hispanic woman in the FAA, it'll be even better. Because right now, or like when I got hired, I was the first woman design engineer, mechanical design engineer, and I would say over 5 to 10 years. Because before me, all the mechanical engineers were male. So if we can have a female mechanical engineer come up next and I can train them, that'll be super encouraging to see. We can build a girl team.
That would be great. I'm pretty sure some female mechanical engineer would really enjoy that.
Yeah, but a lot of these jobs are really intense, and we need to see a lot more support for women in these kinds of jobs. So hopefully we get to see that support from these organizations. Not Well, actually, I know a couple that are doing a pretty good job with maternity leave and telework opportunities, but I hope to see a little bit more because we, as women and as Hispanic women, we can do it. We can do it all. We're capable and we're intelligent and we can do it.
Definitely. Lovely. I loved hearing all of this. This was inspiring and humbling and beautiful and everything in between, Lucia. Thank you so much for sharing your story and inspiring future engineers and aviation professionals. Your journey is definitely a reminder that perseverance, education, and representation can open doors for future generations. To all of our audience, visit www.nhcfae.org to learn more about the organization, scholarships, mentorship opportunities, and our mission to support aviation and aerospace professionals. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.